looking at the guy who is running this country right now, allegedly, who really thinks he's running this country? There's no possible way at all. Mr. Brandon, it is a battle between good and evil. It's getting serious, but Brandon's running the country, allegedly. And there are times where I go back and I look at it and look at old videos of him, and he was very quick on his feet. You know, he's a career politician, but he was always gaffe prone. This dude was always very prone to gaffes. And it was funny at first, but let me take you to where it's kind of gone. So, Joe, just so you know, you are the husband of the First Lady.
But that's enough, too. Look at the stage. But there's been a little change in the arrangement of who's on the stage because of lady's husband contracting COVID. But look at this room and what you see. Pardon? That's right. She's fine. It's me. That's not together.
Yeah,
Second lady.
Joe, that's you. Joe, the husband of the First Lady, that's you, bro. He's like, wait, what'd you say? He's like, huh? What? Joe, President Biden, that's you. They had to interrupt him during the speech to say, like, sir. He's had so many different things. Do you know what he meant by roaches here? And it's just weird in general.
And by the way, you know, I sit on the stand and it get hot. I got hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun. And the kids used to come up and reach in the pool and rub my leg down so it was straight, and then watch the hair come back up again. They look at it. So I learned about roaches. I learned about kids jumping on my lap. And I've loved kids jumping on my lap. And I tell you,
it's not funny. The creepiest part of that one is at the end where, you know, he's kind of talking and projecting, and then at the end he transformed into like a creep story. He's like, I loved kids jumping on my lap. Like, bruh, what's wrong with you?
rub my leg down so it was straight, and then watch the hair come back up again. They look at it. So I learned about roaches. I learned about kids jumping on my lap. And I've loved kids jumping on my lap. And I tell you,
bro, that's not normal, man. I don't know, man. That's not. It's just me. Maybe it's just me. That's not. I never even heard anybody say anything like that in my life. Are there any Rush Limbaugh fans here? Oh man, I miss Rush. He was the best. Oh, Rush Limbaugh. And no, when I say, I say that a lot, but when I say he was the best, I literally mean he was the greatest radio personality of all time. And the reason I bring him up is this clip reminds me of him. Rush would play this on his show. I've probably heard Rush play this 100 times on his show. Stand up, Chuck. Stand up.
And I also am told that Chuck Graham, state senator's here. Chuck, stand up, Chuck. Let him see you. Oh,
stand up,
God
Chuck.
love you. What am I talking about? I tell you what, you're making everybody else stand up, though, pal. Thank you very, very much. I tell you what, stand up for Chuck.
He played that off well. Chuck is confined to a wheelchair.
You can tell I'm new. Good to see you, buddy. Thank you. Thank you.
He was much younger then, too. He's had a history of these things. Nowadays, his gaffes are a little bit different. Now it's like I don't even know what he's saying.
I'll lead an effective strategy to mobilize true international effort to press.
True international effort to press it.
I'll lead an effective strategy to mobilize true international effort to press.
What was that? What did you say?
I'll lead an effective strategy to mobilize true and international.
Okay, whatever that is, you sound passionate about it though. At least say it with confidence. He plays off his gaffes really well. When you gaff a lot, you have to play it off a lot.
I think it's a right for people to have bad health care.
I want bad calf care. You know, I used to be a proponent of bad calf care too, until you all in the government lost my trust, and now I'm not for bad calf care, and I'm being serious. Whatever the hell that is. Tim Pool was right about this. And have you ever listened to a show and you know, you listen to it a lot? And Tim is an example of this for me, where I was like, oh, Tim, I hear what you're saying about Biden and his gaffes, but he's always been gaffy. He's always done gaffes. This is nothing new. Tim would say, this is getting serious. Ian would say it too. I'm going to play this clip here. They would say, I know it sounds funny, we're joking around and stuff, but what if we get into war or get into a serious situation? He says something that we don't know what he means. Nobody knows what he really means, and it kind of causes confusion. And Tim would say that, and I'd be like, Tim, I hear you. I'm not against you on it, but I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal.
Said when he was saying the Ukrainian people, at one point he said the Uranian people, and people like,
He said Iranian.
the closest real word to the sound he made is Iranian, but it sounded like Uranian, so I was making fun of him like he was talking about Uranus.
I think Uranus.
That's how I say it.
He said Iranian.
Russia will never get the hearts and minds of the Iranian people.
The Iranian people.
Yeah.
No matter how many
Never
tanks
say
they
never.
have outside Kiev.
But here's the important.
Oh yeah,
point
I want
here.
to talk back about him splitting the country.
Why do we believe he meant to say Ukrainian? Who is the person who gets to decide what Joe Biden really meant? If Joe Biden, so he was meeting with the G7 and he said, we got, troops in Libya, we're going to be sending military. He meant Syria. What would happen? What would happen if Joe Biden's in a situation room meeting and he's like, we got to send these weapons to the Iranian people, and then someone was like, are you, Mr. President, are you sure? Yeah, we're gonna send $30 billion, some fighter jets to the Iranian people, and they'll go, whatever you say, sir, I'll make it happen. And then breaking news: Iran receives massive payload of cash from U.S. government.
Dude, it's not even a joke.
But hold on. Imagine the alternative. Joe Biden says, we're going to send a pallet of cash to the Ukrainian people. And someone goes, he meant Iranian people.
and then they decide for themselves.
Exactly.
When it's hitting the fan and it's wartime, make a decision now, and he says the wrong word, that's death.
But that's why it's so dangerous to have a president that effectively is mentally impaired.
No, and he actually, we were talking
That's
about
the
this.
most polite way I've ever heard
It's a
someone
very
describe
polite
it.
way of putting it, and we were sort of joking about this the other day. We were watching his State of the Union, poking fun at him. It is actually genuinely sad. The fact that we were all talking about this after the show, this is probably the best speech he's given in his entire presidency, and he's slurring every single word. He sounds intoxicated.
Jason J said it perfectly here. Who gets to decide? Who's deciding? The corporate press. We don't know what the real thing is, but the corporate press is spinning it. Of course. It's dangerous. So we laugh and have fun with it. But multiple times on this trip with Joe Biden going overseas to Poland, and I forget where else he visited over there, he said U.S. won't use chemical weapons after Biden says U.S. would respond to Russian chemical attack in kind. If you understand, so in kind means that you would respond the exact same way.
And to clarify on chemical weapons, if chemical weapons were used in Ukraine, would that trigger a military response from NATO?
It would trigger a response in kind. Whether or not you're asking whether NATO would cross, we'd make that decision at the time.
And my final.
So you can see that he struggles here. I skipped too far ahead in the clip here. This is the part I wanted, was responding in kind. Take a look at his face.
A military response from NATO?
It would trigger a response in kind. Whether or not you're asking whether NATO.
So he says it would trigger a response in kind. And then they had to clean that up. Like, no, we didn't really mean in kind. So the troops He also made that comment with when he went to meet the troops here, and he talked about, hey, how you're going to, when you go there, you're going to see. Nobody had announced that anybody was going anywhere. So now they said U.S. troops won't go to Ukraine. So they're having to clean up some very serious things. It started with roaches that he won't explain on his own. And now it's coming to even more serious things than even worst case of racism or just blind or a blank mind. Now we're talking about this kind of stuff. What is he saying as far as his team? Is his team on the same page with him? Let's listen to what they talked about with sanctions.
I'm straight. You remember, if you covered me from the very beginning, I did not say that, in fact, the sanctions would deter him. Sanctions never deter. You keep talking about that.
Yes, our intention is to have a deterrent effect.
The president believes that sanctions are intended to deter.
The purpose of the sanctions, in the first instance, is to try to deter Russia from going to war.
The allied relationship is such that we have agreed that the deterrence effect of these sanctions is still a meaningful one.
So they all use the same term, deterred. And Joe Biden says it wasn't to deter.
Get something straight. You remember, if you covered me from the very beginning, I did not say that, in fact, the sanctions would deter him. Sanctions never deter. You keep talking about that.
So he talks about it and talks in the tone to make you look like you're crazy. I'm not the crazy one. And not me. Let me speak for myself. I didn't say that you said it would deter. Your whole team, cabinet, vice president, secretary of state used those terms. To my knowledge, I haven't heard anybody ask him to clean that up. Lynn F. says they had to clean up calling for Putin being removed from power. That's a pretty serious thing. President Biden ended his speech seeming to call for regime change in Russia. For God's sakes, this man cannot remain in power. That's what he said. I mean, is that on its own, and I'll tell you where they cleaned it up, that on its own sounds like a declaration of war.
For God's sake, this man can remain in power. God bless you all, and may God defend our freedom, and may God protect our troops. Thank you for your...
Does that sound like a mistake? I don't know. Bottom line is they had to clean up another thing in the middle of basically the early origins of World War III right now. At some point, this is the cleanup statement where they said the president's point was not that Putin cannot be allowed to exercise power over his neighbors or the region. He was not discussing Putin's power in Russia or regime change. That's not what it came across as. And then this is just a random person on Twitter, but I think there's probably other people out there. He was talking about there's going to be a food shortage. So now they've had to clean up so many things. This person, Joe, says, don't forget about his forecast of worldwide famine and food shortages extending to this country. Not sure he's been corrected on this one, though, which scares me. Joe, there's no correction for that one. Luckily in the U.S., that's why I'm grateful to be a U.S. citizen. It will unfortunately affect the poor in the world first, but we will feel it. We're already starting to feel it now. Joe, there's no correction for that one. Joe Valls. And I don't blame him. We don't even know where we're at anymore. There have been so many corrections. Joe Valls is waiting for a correction. When Joe Biden says there's going to be a food shortage, that's just the basic duties of a leader. He can't fulfill them. So you must use the Constitution to remove him. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but that doesn't change that it should. Using the Constitution to remove Mr. Biden from office is the correct way to do it. This is from Washington Examiner. This was actually after the Afghanistan debacle. If you could apply this to 5 different scandals. I did a segment where I listed off 8 different reasons. 8 different separate reasons why this could get done. Jason Jace with the $2 super chat. Thank you, sir. He says, thank God we don't have mean tweets. Who wouldn't love a mean tweet or two right now if it meant a president that said, if you do this, we'll do this. So just calm down right now. There's the 25th Amendment. So it's not impeachment. What would happen is it would take members of Congress, but first it would start with Vice President Harris, and before it even went to Congress. This would be contentious. Harris and Biden don't get along. Harris and Jill don't get along. He's not going to, in a vacuum, just disappear for Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris doesn't get along with many in the cabinet. Allegedly, I'm not there in D.C., allegedly. She doesn't get along with Mayor Pete. I'm pretty confident in saying that from the reports, reading stuff, the debates, and all that kind of stuff. Mayor Pete is Team Biden. Joe Biden looks at him like a son. So Joe Biden got beef with Kamala. You know Mayor Pete's going to have beef with Kamala. But so what I'm saying is Kamala would need to get the vote of the cabinet to get this done. I don't think she could even do that. Forget that. This is what should happen. The vice president should begin the process. And I'm not saying you would go from Joe Biden to Kamala Harris. I'm not saying that's like a huge upgrade, but this is what needs to happen. Section 4 of the 25th Amendment has never been used. We've seen it in movies. Any 24 fans here? House of Cards, West Wing. These are great shows here. I never watched Madam Secretary. Designated Survivor is a decent show. Not the greatest. That's the worst show of those there. I haven't seen Madam Secretary, though, but West Wing is classic. They've all tackled this process, but first, Vice President Harris and at least 7 members of the principal cabinet, they call it the executive department, the cabinet would have to send a written declaration to Congress. At that time, Kamala would immediately become the acting president. It's not done, though. Importantly, and unknown to most, the only votes are the VP and the 15 cabinet secretaries, so the core cabinet. Next, if Biden disagrees, he can send a declaration to Congress disputing the finding of inability. If Vice President Harris and the principal officers resubmit their declaration within 4 days, then it goes to Congress. So if Biden disagrees, they get one last chance to say, okay, we're not going to do it, or we are going to do it. This would be the utmost of utmost seriousness. I'm not joking with this or saying this in a light manner. That's why I wanted to take time to kind of make my case. I'm not going to spend an hour on it, but I could. I just want to make my case. He's lost the confidence of people, just common people. At that juncture, Congress must convene within 48 hours, if not already in session, and decide the issue within 21 days. That's a long time. They'd be debating for 21 days? Man, that should be shorter. 2/3 of both the House and Senate must agree with the Declaration of Inability. Kind of reminds me of amendment. You would need 2/3 of both houses. So that's not an easy task. Otherwise, the president resumes power. If Congress votes to keep the 25th invoked, then Mr. Biden remains a sideline president and Mrs. Harris continues as acting president. What would happen is most likely they would resign. Because what's Joe Biden going to do? He doesn't even want to be in the White House. He's always going back to Delaware or wherever every weekend pretty much. So she would become president. She would nominate a new VP, but the House and Senate would have to approve that. It's time to have a serious discussion. Let me know what you think. Oh, wow. The first words I saw when I looked at the chat were knee pads. So let's see what we got going on here. Lynn F says, knee pads makes me nervous, but Brandon is going to get everyone killed. I think I have to look at it step by step. I know you're joking there, Lynn, in a way with the names, but I just have to look at it step by step. The first step is Joe Biden clearly is not fit to be the face, even the puppet of this situation. So I don't even care who the vice president is. He's not fit. He's got to go.